The silent scream, the stars, never looked the same after that night. Emma Chen would remember this moment for the rest of her life, sitting in the communication center of Aurora Prime, humanity's most advanced deep space monitoring station. The station floated silently in the void, 3 light-years from Earth. Listening to the whispers of the cosmos, Emma had been working the night shift for 6 months, and most nights brought nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional automated beacon from distant human colonies. She was used to the silence, the endless static that filled the universe between civilizations. But tonight was different. The first signal came at 0347 hours, ship time. Emma almost missed it, buried as it was beneath layers of interference and cosmic noise. Something about the pattern caught her attention, though, a rhythm that seemed organized to be natural. She isolated the frequency and ran it through the station's most sophisticated analysis programs. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the station's chief xenobiologist, was asleep in her quarters when Emma's urgent call woke her up. Sarah had spent 15 years studying theoretical alien communication patterns, but had never expected to actually use that knowledge. "Emma, this better be good," Sarah said as she hurried into the communication center, her dark hair still messy. "From sleep, you know how I get when you wake me up for another false alarm." Emma's eyes were wide with excitement and fear. "Sarah, I need you to look at this. I've been running the signal through every analysis program we have for 3 hours. This isn't natural. This isn't human. And Sarah, I think someone is dying out there." The 2 women worked together for the next 4 hours, slowly unraveling the mystery of the alien signal. The mathematics were complex, but the emotion behind the transmission was unmistakably clear. Fear, desperation, a plea for help that transcended language barriers. As dawn approached on Aurora Prime's artificial day cycle, they had their first breakthrough. The signal wasn't random. It was a structured message, repeated over and over, growing weaker with each transmission. Sarah's hands shook as she activated the universal translation protocol they had developed for theoretical first contact scenarios. The voice that emerged from their speakers was unlike anything they had ever heard. Melodic, almost musical, but filled with such sadness that both women felt tears forming in their eyes. "To any who might hear this message, we are the Valdari of the 3rd moon of Kepler 4 for to be. We have lived in peace for 3,000 years, creating art and music, learning the secrets of our world, raising our children with love. We know not if there are others among the stars who share our values, but if you exist, please know that we try to live with honor." Emma and Sarah looked at each other in shock. First contact. This was actually happening. But as they listened to more of the message, their wonder turned to horror. "The Korthok Empire found us 6 months ago. We had no weapons, no armies, no knowledge of war. We thought all intelligent beings would value life as we do. We were wrong. They did not come for our resources or our land. They came because they enjoy causing pain. They broadcast our suffering to intimidate other worlds." The alien voice, which they later learned belonged to a Valdari named Zaranoth, continued with details that made both humans feel sick. The Korthok were not conquerors in any traditional sense. They were something worse. A civilization that had turned cruelty into an art form. They have taken our children. They force us to watch as they torment the innocent. Our population of 50 million has been reduced to less than 10 million in 6 months. We have tried to hide, to run, to plead for mercy, but they hunt us like animals. If anyone receives this message, please remember that we existed. Remember that we chose love over hate, creation over destruction. Sarah was crying now, thinking of her own children back on Earth. Emma, we have to contact Earth immediately. This changes everything. We're not alone in the universe, and some of our neighbors are monsters. Emma's fingers flew over her communication console, preparing the most important message in human history. But as she worked, more alien transmissions came through, dozens of them, each weaker than the last. The Valdari were dying, and their final act was to send their story to the stars, hoping someone would remember them. The emergency session of the United Earth Council lasted 18 hours. President Diana Foster sat at the head of the table, surrounded by military advisors, scientists, and diplomats. The evidence was overwhelming. An alien species was being systematically exterminated, and they had asked the universe for help. General Harrison Blake, Earth's top military commander, spread tactical displays across the conference table. The Valdari homeworld is 14 light-years away. With our faster ships, we could reach them in 8 weeks, but we have no idea what we're up against. This Korthok Empire could have technology far beyond ours. Dr. Elena Vasquez, leading expert on interstellar politics, raised a different concern. If we intervene, we're announcing humanity's presence to potentially hostile aliens. The Korthok might decide we're next on their list. We could be condemning our own species. President Foster listened to the debate for hours, but her mind kept returning to one transmission they had received that morning. It was from a young Valdari, barely an adult by their species standards, hiding in the ruins of what used to be a school. My name is Kethera. I am a teacher, or I was before the darkness came. I am sending this message from beneath the ruins of our learning center, where we taught our young ones about the beauty of existence. The Korthok found us 3 days ago. I watched them take my students. I heard their cries for help. If there are beings of conscience listening to this, please know that our children died calling for their parents. Please know that they never understood why some creatures choose to cause suffering. The room fell silent as Foster finished reading the transcript. Admiral Marcus Webb, the grizzled commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet, stood up slowly. His weathered face showed the strain of decades of military service. Madam President, with respect, we're debating the wrong question. The question isn't whether we should help. The question is what kind of species we want to be. Do we want to be the kind of people who hear children crying for help and do nothing because it might be dangerous? Foster looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some showed fear, others determination, but all showed the weight of the decision they were about to make. Defense Secretary Patricia Wang spoke up. If we do this, there's no going back. Once we engage with hostile aliens, we're committed to a path we can't predict. We're already on that path, Admiral Webb replied. The moment we received that distress call, we became responsible for our response to it. Doing nothing is still a choice, and it's a choice our children will have to live with. President Foster made the decision that would change human history forever. Admiral Webb, you have authorization to assemble the largest fleet in human history. We're going to save the Valdari, and we're going to show this Korthok Empire what happens when they hurt innocent people while humanity is watching. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Every shipyard in human space worked around the clock. Factory workers volunteered for double shifts. Scientists developed new weapons and shield systems. Pilots trained for combat scenarios they had only imagined in nightmares. But the most remarkable thing was how ordinary people responded. when news of the alien distress call became public, humanity united in a way it never had before. Children drew pictures of humans and aliens holding hands. Musicians composed songs about standing up to bullies. Engineers volunteered to work without pay on military ships. Emma Chen and Dr. Martinez were transferred to the flagship of the rescue fleet, the UES Defiance. Their job was to maintain communication with any Valdari survivors and to serve as humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien species on the bridge of the Defiance. Admiral Webb stood before a tactical display showing 847 human ships. Every vessel represented thousands of volunteers who had left their families behind to save people they had never met. Fighter pilots, Marines, engineers, medics, and support staff, all of them united by a simple principle. When you hear someone crying for help, you help them. Captain Alex Rodriguez, Webb's top fighter pilot, approached the Admiral with the latest intelligence reports. "Sir, we've analyzed the Korthok transmissions our deep space monitors picked up. They're boasting about their conquest of the Valdari. They're planning to move on to another peaceful species next." Webb studied the data with growing anger. The Korthok weren't just murderers. They were serial killers on a galactic scale. They had destroyed dozens of civilizations over the past 1,000 years, always choosing victims who couldn't fight back. "Captain Rodriguez, prepare your squadrons. We jump to the Valdari system in 6 hours. When we arrive, I want the Korthok to understand immediately that they're not dealing with their usual victims." As the human fleet prepared for faster-than-light travel, one final transmission came from the Valdari homeworld. It was from Zaranoth, the same voice that had started this entire chain of events. "To whoever has been listening to our messages, we are grateful that someone heard our voices. Most of our people are gone now, but a few thousand remain hidden in deep shelters. We no longer ask for rescue, for we know that is impossible. We ask only that you remember us kindly, and that, if you encounter others like the Korthok, you will not let them spread their darkness unchallenged. We go now to our final rest, knowing that somewhere in the universe, someone cared enough to listen." Admiral Webb listened to the message with tears in his eyes. Then he opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. "This is Admiral Webb. In 1 hour, we jump to the Valdari system. We go not as conquerors or explorers, but as neighbors. We go to stand with the innocent against those who would destroy them. We go to prove that when evil thinks it has one, humanity has something to say. About that, all ships, prepare for jump. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you make humanity angry." The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as 847 human ships vanished into hyperspace, racing toward a world where children cried for help in the darkness. Behind them, Earth waited and prayed. Ahead of them, an empire of cruelty was about to learn that they had made the worst mistake in their 1,000-year history. They had hurt innocents while humanity was listening. Asterisk. When giants fall, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valdari system like avenging angels, materializing from the void. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching his tactical display populate with sensor data. What he saw made his blood run cold. 47 massive Korthok warships surrounded the beautiful blue-green world of the Valdari. The alien vessels were enormous, each one easily 5 times larger than humanity's biggest battleship. They were dark, angular things that seemed designed more to inspire fear than to fight actual battles. Worse, they were broadcasting on all frequencies, "Admiral, you need to hear this," Communications Officer Emma Chen said, her face pale as she routed the Korthok transmissions through the ship's speakers. The bridge filled with sounds that no human had ever heard before, but every human understood. Instinctively, screaming, crying, the sounds of a civilization dying while their tormentors laughed. The Korthok weren't just conquering the Valdari, they were broadcasting their suffering as entertainment. "Turn it off," Webb ordered, his voice tight with rage. "All ships, this is Admiral Webb. You can see what we're facing. Those ships are 5 times our size, but remember something important. Bullies only look big when they're picking on people who can't fight back. Today, they face people who can." Captain Rodriguez was leading the first wave of fighter squadrons when he got his first good look at the enemy fleet. The Korthok ships were massive but moved sluggishly through space. Their weapons were clearly designed for orbital bombardment, not ship-to-ship combat. "All fighters, this is Rodriguez. Look at how they move. Those ships are designed to terrorize civilians, not fight other military forces. Stay fast, stay smart, and remember what we're here to do." On the surface of the Valdari homeworld, the few survivors hiding in underground shelters felt the ground shake as the first explosions lit up the sky above them. Zaranoth, the young Valdari whose messages had reached across the stars, pressed her face to a small observation window in their bunker. "Something is different," she whispered to the other survivors. "The enemy ships are moving strangely, and there are new lights in the sky." Elder Marthal, one of the few Valdari leaders still alive, joined her at the window. He was old and tired, having watched his peaceful civilization die over the past months. "Child, do not hope for miracles. We learned long ago that we are alone in our suffering." But as they watched, something extraordinary happened. The new lights in the sky began attacking the Korthok vessels. Whoever had come to their system was fighting the empire that had destroyed their world. General Krex, commander of the Korthok occupation force, was enjoying his morning meal when alarms began screaming throughout his flagship. For a moment, he couldn't understand what his officers were telling him. Attack. Impossible. No one had ever attacked the Korthok Empire. "Unknown vessels, you are trespassing in Korthok space." He broadcast on all frequencies, his voice full of the arrogance of 1,000 years of unopposed conquest. "Withdraw immediately, or we will demonstrate why the galaxy fears us." The response came immediately, and it was unlike anything any Korthok had ever heard. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Human Defense Fleet. You have tortured and murdered innocent people. Your reign of terror ends today. Surrender immediately and release all prisoners, or we will destroy every one of your ships." General Krex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Humans, never heard of you. You have small ships and big words. Watch as we crush you like all the others." But when Krex ordered his ships to attack, something went wrong. The human vessels didn't flee in terror like every other species the Korthok had encountered. Instead, they attacked with a precision and ferocity that caught the Empire completely off guard. Captain Rodriguez led his fighter squadron straight at the largest Korthok ship. The enemy vessel fired massive plasma bolts that could vaporize a city block, but the weapons were too slow to track fast-moving fighters. Rodriguez and his pilots danced between the beams like deadly butterflies, targeting the ship's weapon systems with surgical strikes. "This is what you get for hurting kids," Rodriguez muttered as his missiles destroyed another enemy gun emplacement. Aboard the Defiance, Admiral Webb coordinated the battle with the calm precision of a chess master. He had studied the Korthok transmissions for weeks during the journey, and he understood their weakness. They were bullies who had never faced real resistance. All ships concentrate fire on their engines first. We're not here to destroy them all. We're here to disable them and rescue survivors. But if they won't surrender, we'll show them what human determination looks like. The battle that followed became legendary throughout the galaxy. The Korthok ships were huge and heavily armed, but they were also slow and poorly coordinated. Their crews had grown complacent from centuries of fighting only defenseless victims. The human fleet, smaller but vastly more agile, began systematically dismantling the enemy formation. Dr. Sarah Martinez, working frantically in the Defiance's science lab, had been monitoring Valdari life signs across the planet. "Admiral, I'm detecting survivors in underground shelters across the northern continent. But there are also life signs aboard the enemy ships. They're holding prisoners." Webb's expression hardened. "All ships, be advised. Enemy vessels contain Valdari prisoners. Disable, don't destroy. We're not leaving anyone behind." What happened next showcased everything that made humanity special in the galaxy. Instead of simply trying to win the battle, human forces began a complex rescue operation while still under fire. Marine units launched boarding actions on disabled Korthok ships, fighting through corridors filled with enemy soldiers to reach prisoner holding areas. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led one such boarding party onto a Korthok vessel. What she found in the ship's holding cells would haunt her dreams for years. Hundreds of Valdari, including children, crammed into spaces barely large enough for a dozen beings. They were starving, terrified, and many were injured. "It's okay," Sarah said softly, though she knew the aliens couldn't understand her words. "We're humans. We're here to help." The Valdari prisoners stared at these strange new beings in confusion. After months of brutality, they couldn't believe that anyone had come to save them, back in space. The tide of battle was turning decisively. Half the Korthok fleet was disabled, their weapons destroyed and engines crippled. The others were trying to flee, but human ships pursued them relentlessly. General Krex found himself trapped aboard a crippled flagship, watching his empire's reputation for invincibility crumble around him. When the humans demanded his surrender, for the 5th time, he finally responded, "What are you? What species produces warriors like this?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Admiral Webb's response was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring every survivor in the system could hear it. "We're humans. We're from a world called Earth, and we have a rule about bullies. When you hurt innocent people, you answer to us." The final phase of the battle wasn't really a battle at all. It was a rescue operation on an unprecedented scale. Human ships landed on the Valdari homeworld, their crews emerging to find a civilization in ruins but not completely destroyed. The few thousand survivors who emerged from their hiding places couldn't believe what they were seeing. Zaranoth was among the first to approach the human landing parties. The young Valdari who had sent desperate messages to the stars now found herself face to face with the beings who had answered her call. Through hastily assembled translation devices, she managed to communicate with Captain Rodriguez. "You came," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We sent messages to empty space, never believing anyone would hear us, and you came." Rodriguez knelt down to her level, his own eyes wet with tears. "Of course we came. When someone cries for help, good people help. That's what good people do." The aftermath of the Battle of Valdari Prime sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Korthok Empire had been defeated. Word spread quickly among the civilizations that lived in fear of the Empire's cruelty. A new species had emerged, one that didn't just defend themselves, but defended others in the weeks that followed. Human medical teams worked alongside Valdari survivors to rebuild their civilization. Engineers helped reconstruct their cities. Teachers helped their children overcome trauma. Most importantly, human diplomats began establishing formal relations with this first alien ally, Zoranath, who would become something of a symbol for her. People's survival often visited the human command center. She was fascinated by these beings who had traveled across the galaxy to save strangers. "Why did you do this?" she asked Admiral Webb during one of their conversations. "Your people could have ignored our messages. You could have stayed safe in your own space." Webb thought about the question for a long time, because that's not who we are. Humans have a saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We heard you crying for help, and we couldn't do nothing. The Battle of Valdari Prime changed humanity forever. Earth had intended to send a rescue mission, but they had accidentally announced themselves as the galaxy's new protector. Within months, distress calls began arriving from other species terrorized by various threats. Each time, humanity responded. Some of Earth's leaders worried about the burden this placed on their civilization. But Admiral Webb, now promoted to lead humanity's new Galactic Defense Force, had a different perspective. "We didn't choose to be the galaxy's protector," he told the Earth Council, "but the galaxy chose us. Every species that calls for help, every child that cries in the darkness, they're all saying the same thing. They're saying they believe we're the kind of people who will come when they need us. How can we disappoint that trust?" The Empire never recovered from their defeat at Valdari Prime. The myth of their invincibility was shattered, and subject species across their territory began to rebel. Within 5 years, the empire that had terrorized the galaxy for a millennium had collapsed completely. General Krex, imprisoned on a human facility, was interviewed by galactic historians trying to understand what had happened. "They were supposed to run," he said, confusion still evident in his voice. "Everyone runs when they see our ships. Everyone begs for mercy when they hear our threats. But not the humans. They just got angrier. How do you fight an enemy that gets stronger when you threaten them?" Back on Valdari Prime, now a thriving world once again, a monument stood in the central plaza of the rebuilt capital city. It was a simple thing, just a communications array pointing toward Earth with an inscription in both Valdari and human languages. "To those who heard our cry and answered, to those who crossed the void to stand with strangers, to the humans who taught us that we are not alone in choosing light over darkness." And in the deepest part of space, on monitoring stations like Aurora Prime, human operators continued to listen to the whispers of the cosmos. They listened for many things now: signs of new life, calls for help, threats to the innocent, because they had learned something important that night, when Emma Chen first heard an alien voice crying for help. They had learned that the universe was full of wonders and horrors in equal measure. They had learned that there were species that chose cruelty and species that chose compassion. Most importantly, they had learned that when you stand up for others, you don't just save them, you save yourself, becoming the kind of people worthy of the trust placed in you. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity. The distress call that had sparked humanity's fury had done something else entirely. It had sparked humanity's conscience, and once awakened, That conscience would never sleep again. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other voices were calling for help. And somewhere else, human ships were changing course to answer those calls, because that's what humans did now. That's who they had chosen to be. Asterisk.